My name is Elias Monroe. And I'm 35. For most of my life, I wore the mask of the obliging son. The invisible sibling. The guy who never made a fuss. You know the type. Quiet at holidays. Pays for dinner without anyone noticing. Swallows the insult. Changes the subject. Keeps the peace. But the day my grandfather died and left his estate solely to me, an estate worth close to $1. 1 million something in me shifted. The house. The savings. The investment accounts. All of it. Mine. And that's when the storm began. Let me back up. My younger sister, Camilla, is 31. She's the charismatic one. Sparkling laugh. Designer heels. Always knows just what to say. And lies with such finesse you'd think it was an art form. She's burned through 3 careers. 2 engagements. And a dozen family credit cards without blinking. And our parents, especially our mother, they just called her ambitious. Meanwhile, I was the fallback. The dependable one. Translation, the one expected to fix everything when she lit it on fire. But see, Grandpa Charles was different. He didn't buy into the performance. After my grandmother passed away, I was the one who stayed. I handled his appointments. Sorted his medications. Managed the house. I was the one who heard him wheeze through lonely nights and helped him walk when his legs began to fail. Camilla, she sent flowers once. Forgot his birthday the next year. When Grandpa died, the will was unambiguous, everything went to me. Not to be fair. Not to keep the peace. But because I earned it. Because he trusted me. I wish I could say the family took it well. What actually happened? A week after the funeral, my mother, Lenora, cornered me in the kitchen of my apartment, too polite for drama. Too cold for sincerity. Elias, she said, laying a manicured hand on the counter like she owned it. You know your grandfather wasn't well when he made that will. I didn't look up from the tea I was making. He had full cognitive capacity. His doctor signed the affidavit. But Camilla was in Ibiza when Grandpa broke his hip. I was the one who took him to the ER. Lenora's lips pressed into a thin line. You can't possibly intend to keep it all. I stirred my tea. Actually, I do. They thought that was my opening act of rebellion. But it wasn't. That was just the prelude. What they didn't know, I'd already secured everything into an ironclad trust. The Monarch Foundation weeks before the funeral. The trust held the deed to the house. The stocks. Even the antique collection in the East Wing. I wasn't taking any chances. I knew Camilla. I knew Lenora. And I knew if I gave them even 1 inch of assumption, they'd bulldoze the whole estate out from under me with crocodile tears and fake legal counsel. For a few weeks, it was quiet. So quiet. Camilla posted cryptic Instagram captions like, "Next era loading and inheritance vibes only." Lenora began calling extended family members with sob stories about how Eli manipulated Dad while he was grieving. But I didn't bite. I said nothing. I just prepared. Then one Tuesday morning, I pulled into the driveway of the estate, an ivy-covered federal-style mansion on the edge of Crestwood Hills. Grandpa had called it the crown jewel of the family. I'd been doing yard work. In jeans and a hoodie. Earbuds in. I didn't hear the car until it was too late. A black Escalade rolled up. Parked like it belonged there. Camilla stepped out in stilettos and a blazer. Followed by a man in a 3-piece suit and a woman with a clipboard. My stomach dropped. Hey. Big bro Camilla kirpt. Sunglasses perched on her forehead. Don't mind us. Just doing the walkthrough. I removed one earbud. Walk through the house. Our lawyer advised we take inventory before the estate sale. I raised an eyebrow. There's no sale. And this house isn't for you to walk through. The man beside her cleared his throat. I'm Todd DeMarco, estate consultant. We filed a challenge to the will. On grounds of undue influence. My blood ran cold. But I didn't show it. You filed a challenge, I said. Voice calm. Camilla grinned like she'd won something. It's already in motion. Probate court's got the paperwork. We'll be splitting the estate soon. Don't worry. I didn't say anything else. Just stepped aside and let them in. Why? Because I already knew. I knew about the false affidavit Camilla had faked. I knew Todd DeMarco wasn't a real consultant. He'd lost his license 2 years ago for ethics violations. And I knew the house was protected by a legal moat they couldn't swim through even with forged documents. I watched them walk through the foyer with smug entitlement, pointing at chandeliers, snapping pictures of the library. Later that night, I sent everything to my attorney, Lara Bos, a brilliant estate defense specialist with a reputation for making fraudsters regret waking up that morning. She smiled when she saw the email. Oh, this is going to be fun. By the end of the week, Laura had filed a counter motion, an injunction, and a fraud warning to the court. But she also suggested we wait. They'll push harder, she said. And when they do, we'll be ready. 3 days later, the front gate security camera caught Camilla trying to enter with a locksmith. The police were called. She told the officers I had locked her out of her own legacy. She was almost in tears. Oscar-worthy stuff. Too bad I had the trust documents on hand. With a notarized letter from the probate court declaring my sole legal authority over the property, she was escorted off the premises, still filming herself on TikTok as she went. But I wasn't celebrating, because I knew the next hit would come from a direction I wasn't expecting. And I was right. Because the next letter wasn't from Camilla. It was from Lenora's attorney. And it wasn't a legal challenge. It was a demand for emotional restitution. She wanted $200. $0 for her pain and suffering at being excluded from her rightful role as matriarch of the Monroe estate. And she wasn't bluffing. Because attached to that letter was a 27-page case study she'd sent to a tabloid journalist. She was planning to go public. And that, right there, that was the moment I stopped being polite. That was the moment I declared war. They say family can't hurt you unless you let them in, and I had. Once. But the moment that 27-page smear job landed in my inbox, all bets were off. Lenora didn't just want a slice of the estate. She wanted the narrative. She wanted to spin the story until the headlines read, "Grieving mother, betrayed by selfish son." She wanted to twist a grandfather's legacy into a cautionary tale of ungrateful heirs and stolen honor. And if I didn't act fast, she just might succeed. The first article hit a local gossip blog within 48 hours. I wasn't named directly. But it didn't take a genius to decode phrases like heartless caretaker, hordes, dying, man's wealth or estranged daughter, denied access to father's final days. The comment section was brutal. Strangers called me a leech. A parasici. Even a vulturi. Camilla added fuel to the fire with a tearful video captioned, "He changed the locks the day after the funeral. I just wanted to see the garden one more time." Her mascara was flawless. Her lies were better. I didn't reply. He didn't post. I didn't call reporters. I called Laura. She answered before the second ring. "They're playing the long game," she said flatly. "They're not trying to win in court, they're trying to drown you in reputation damage so you cave before it gets there." I rubbed my eyes. "Then what do we do?" Her pause was short. Purposeful. "We go deeper. You want this to end. We stop letting them set the tone." And just like that, the defense ended. The counterstrike began. Step 1, Laura dug through every financial record tied to the Monroe estate. Not just the clean ones. The emergency checks Grandpa Charles had written in the final years. The sudden withdrawals. The untraceable gifts. Patterns emerged. Recurring payments to a personal account in Camilla's name. Cleverly labeled medical support. Medical for who? Exactly, certainly not for Grandpa, who never left the county hospital network. Then Laura found the real kicker 3 months before Grandpa's fall. A $12. Zero loan. Lenora had convinced him to co-sign for house repairs. The house she sold a year ago. No repairs. No refund. No apology. Step 2, I got help from an unlikely source. My cousin Joel. Second cousin technically. A quiet tax attorney with a soft spot for whiskey and old people. He'd always liked Grandpa Charles. came by every other Sunday with banana bread and tax tips. Joel wasn't flashy, but he knew numbers. And when he saw what Lara found, he nearly choked on his bourbon. "This isn't just shady," he said, adjusting his glasses. "This is prosecutable." I let that sink in. "Sove prosecute." His face lit up like he'd been waiting for someone to say those words his whole life. Step 3, control the narrative. The Monroe name still meant something in Crestwood Hills. Grandpa Charles had donated to every veterans fund and library renovation for a decade. So I contacted the Crestwood Gazette, not the bloggers. Not the gossip mill. The old school paper where reporters still wore lanyards and took notes by hand. I didn't give them my side of the story. I gave them the documents. The trust files. The fake affidavits. The withdrawal receipts from Grandpa's account. I even gave them a picture of Camilla vacationing in Monaco, taken the same week she claimed to be nursing Grandpa through his final decline. They ran the story front page. Legacy under fire, truth behind Monroe family feud. The tide turned faster than I expected. The same day the article dropped, I received an email from a contact at the Department of Adult Protective Services. Anonymous complaint. Tip said to investigate possible financial elder abuse involving Charles Monroe. The timing wasn't subtle. Someone, probably Lenora, had filed the complaint to intimidate me. What she didn't know, I welcomed it. Lara responded with a 200-page compliance binder and a statement so calm it read like a threat. The department closed the case in 2 days. No findings. No infractions. And now we had proof someone weaponized a state agency to harass me. Camilla, true to form, pivoted. She stopped posting sad videos and started uploading TikToks with spiritual quotes about healing, betrayal, and releasing generational wounds. It was laughable. One clip even had her lighting sage in front of a mirror while Halo by Beyoncé played softly in the background. The comments brutal. Half were pitying. The other half quoted the Gazette article word for word. She started deleting them by the hour. But screenshots live forever. And Reddit doesn't forget. Still, they weren't done. Because a week later, I got a letter from their new attorney. A sleazy real estate guy named Victor Hall. Victor had a reputation for bullying settlements out of HOA boards and grieving spouses. His letter was more dramatic than legal. He accused me of emotional hostage-taking, of hoarding communal family wealth, and of disregarding the matriarchal dignity of Miss Lenora Monroe. He ended it with a proposed solution, an even split of the estate, including retroactive payout from the trust. In the spirit of family healing, I laughed so hard I dropped my coffee. But that letter gave us something valuable: intent. They weren't just playing emotional games anymore. They were trying to pressure me into dismantling a legal structure that didn't belong to them. That made it extortion. And that, finally, opened the door Lara had been waiting for. She drafted a formal motion for a judicial injunction and a protective order against both Lenora and Camilla, citing sustained harassment, attempted fraud, and emotional defamation. The filing was sharp, unrelenting, and 73 pages long. We submitted it at 9:00 a.m. on a Monday. By 3:00 p.m., it was trending on local legal blogs. That night, I drove to the Monroe estate. The house was still quiet, still covered in ivy, still filled with the scent of old leather and cedar. I stood in the study, staring at the portrait of Grandpa Charles hanging above the fireplace. For the first time in weeks, I felt something settle in me. This wasn't just about property anymore. It wasn't about money or furniture or who got to host Thanksgiving in the big dining room. It was about who rewrote the story of a man who trusted me with everything he built, and who I had become because of that trust. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time, I wasn't the one dodging punches. Now I was the one choosing where to aim. The house felt heavier the longer I stayed inside. Every floorboard creaked like it was trying to whisper a secret. Every portrait seemed to watch. And even though I'd technically won the first round, public opinion was shifting. Legal filings had teeth. Something inside me still felt unsettled. Not just because of Camilla. Not even because of Lenora. No. It was the silence that bothered me. The pause before the next strike. And sure enough, it came from someone I never saw coming. It started with a phone call from Joel, my cousin, the tax attorney who'd helped dig up Camilla's financial footprints. His voice was low, almost embarrassed. "Hey, Elias," he said. I got a call from Camilla. She wants to meet." That didn't surprise me. What did she offer me? Money. Geld. Cash. To help clarify some things about Grandpa's will and the trust. I didn't speak right away. The betrayal wasn't in the offer. It was in the way Joel hesitated before telling me. Like he'd considered it. Even for a second. Joel swore he didn't take the bribe. And I believed him. Mostly. But the seed was planted. If she approached him, who else had she talked to? I spent the next 2 days making discreet calls. Grandpa's former accountant, his hospice nurse, even the groundskeeper. A quiet man named Miguel who barely spoke English but had been with the family for 20 years. Most were loyal. Some were evasive. One flat out told me, "Camila said you're manipulating everyone. That you faked some of the paperwork." I laughed. But it didn't reach my chest. The smear campaign wasn't just online anymore. She was moving offline. Face to face. Whispering poison like a modern-day Lady Macbeth. Still, I could have handled that. What I couldn't handle, what knocked the air clean out of my lungs, was the letter I received the next morning. It came in a cream-colored envelope. No return address. Inside was a single page. Typed in blocky courier font. No signature. Just 3 sentences. "You think the trust protects you? Ask Lara about the 2019 incident in Charleston. Ask her who really filed the original asset list. Then decide if you still trust her." I sat there. Letter in hand. Mind racing. I'd known Lara for less than a year. She came highly recommended. Her record impeccable. But that letter, it was specific. Too specific to be bluster. And once doubt crawls in, it'd never leave quietly. I could have ignored it. Should've. Maybe. But I called her anyway. Her voice was steady. "Unshaken. Charleston," she repeated. "Ah. That. Yes." I figured that would surface eventually. It wasn't a scandal. Elias. It was a power play. She explained that in 2019, she'd been involved in a high-profile inheritance case, an elderly client who passed without a will. She was accused of front-loading an asset list to expedite probate. The accusation fell apart under scrutiny. But the opposition ran with it for weeks. "No charges," she said. "No violations." But reputations don't always wait for the truth. I asked her flatly if she'd ever altered anything in my trust. Her answer was immediate. "Absolutely not. And I can prove every word." And she did. She sent me a full digital audit trail, timestamps, notarized copies, the full chain of custody for every document filed. It was airtight. But the fact Camilla had gone there, dug into my attorney's past, tried to shake my foundation, proved she was growing desperate. And desperate people do reckless things. Later that night, I found a message taped to my windshield. No envelope this time. Just a sticky note. Scrawled in messy pen. "We know what you did with the East Wing inventory. We know it's not all accounted for." My stomach turned cold. Because that, unlike the Charleston bluff, was dangerously close to something real. The East Wing held some of Grandpa's oldest possessions, Civil War memorabilia, rare books, a few inherited items from his father's estate. Right before he died, he'd asked me to move a few pieces into off-site storage for safekeeping. I did. Nothing illegal. Nothing shady. But the official inventory hadn't been updated yet. The trust listed the items. But the exact location, not public. Camilla couldn't have known. Unless someone told her. Someone close. I checked the storage logs. 3 names had accessed me. Lara. And Miguel. It couldn't be Lara. That ship had sailed. So I drove to Miguel's house. A modest 1-story outside Crestwood. He answered the door wearing a flannel shirt and a look of confusion. I didn't accuse. I just asked. "Has anyone approached you about the house, About the storage? He nodded slowly. Yes. La hermana. Your sister. Came last week. Said she needed photos for insurance. He looked down. Ashamed. I told her no. But, she offered money. I have family back in Honduras. It was hard. I thanked him and left. Pulsponding. Camilla was hunting for angles. I didn't even think she remembered. But if she was trying this hard to get dirt on me, it meant something else entirely. She didn't have anything real. Not yet. And that made her dangerous in a new way. The kind of dangerous that throws darts in the dark, hoping one lands. I spent the next 2 days on lockdown. Not out of fear but strategy. I hired a private investigator. The quiet guy named Richard who'd retired from the county sheriff's department and now ran quiet intel for law firms. I gave him one task: find out who Camilla's been meeting. Who she's paying. Who she's calling. I expected some names. A few receipts. What Richard found blew everything sideways. Camilla had been talking to Uncle Henry. That may not mean much to most people. But in our family, that was war. Henry was Grandpa's only brother. Estranged for over a decade after a business deal turned sour. But blood was blood. And Grandpa still left him a small stipend through a separate account. What I didn't know, Camilla had reconnected with him last year. She'd been feeding him half-truths about the trust. Claiming I was rewriting family history. That I'd convinced Grandpa to cut out everyone but myself. And Henry, bitter, aging, and long removed from the estate, believed her. Richard handed me photos. Meetings at Dino's. Envelopes exchanged. Cash. And then the real dagger: Henry had drafted a counter will. Not legal. Not binding. But enough to stir controversy. Enough to confuse courts. Enough to delay trust proceedings indefinitely if entered as new evidence. Which meant Camilla's next play wasn't theft. It was chaos. Delay the trust. Freeze the assets. Paint me as the manipulator. Then, under the pressure of mounting legal fees and public scrutiny, force a family settlement. It was genius. It was cruel. And I'd already seen it coming. Because what she didn't know, that off-site storage she was so curious about, it didn't just hold antiques. It held a voice recorder. One Grandpa Charles asked me to keep. One he used to document his final wishes. In his own words. Dated and time-stamped. He talked about Camilla. About Lenora. About the lies. About the legacy. About me. I hadn't planned to use it. But maybe it was time. Because in a family like mine, blood didn't run thicker than ambition. And the only thing sharper than betrayal is proof. The first time I heard my grandfather's voice echo through that recorder, it didn't feel like closure. It felt like resurrection. The audio quality wasn't perfect, he was old. Breathless. The kind of tired you don't come back from, but every word was his. Measured. Intentional. This wasn't a casual journal entry or a senile man rambling into a microphone. This was testimony. And it was everything I needed to break the illusion Camilla had worked so hard to build. I sat alone in the study with headphones on. Fingers hovering above the pause button. His voice cracked occasionally. Not from weakness but from the weight of everything he had to say. He started by naming me. Full legal name. Date. Location. Then he went into detail why he created the trust. Why he left the house solely to me. And most damning of all, why he deliberately excluded Camilla and Lenora. This isn't about punishment, he said. It's about honesty. Elias showed up. They didn't. He earned it. They didn't. Then came the stories. Things I didn't even know. Camilla taking money from Grandpa's safe while claiming it was for charity. Lenora convincing him to sign a power of attorney form that, thankfully, I intercepted and voided before she could move a single dime. The part that cut deepest was when he talked about being afraid that when he died, they'd swarm like vultures and try to rewrite the truth. But if you're hearing this, he added, it means Elias stood his ground. Good. That means I picked the right one. I sent the audio to Lara the next morning. Unedited. She called me within the hour. Elias, she said. Her voice unusually sharp. This changes everything. This is legal gold. She explained how the recording, while not a will, qualified as a supplementary testament under state law, especially given its clarity, the date stamps, and its relevance to the estate. It wouldn't replace the will, but it would destroy any illusion of ambiguity. And it would annihilate Camilla's counter-will stunt before it ever reached a judge. Still, Lara Cauchan me. This isn't just evidence, it's a bomb. Once it's out, there's no putting the fire out. It'll either burn them down or light the whole courtroom up. I knew she was right. But I was done playing defense. So I gave her the green light. And within 24 hours, we filed the audio as part of a supplemental declaration to the trust proceedings. Oficial. Sealed. Time estampit. The game board had changed. Camilla found out the same day. Not from me. Not even from her lawyer. From the court docket, which had gone public the moment our filing cleared. And just like that, the silence ended. My phone rang 7 times that afternoon. Her number. Her voice. Her panic. I didn't answer a single call. Let her sit in it. Let her feel what it was like to be shut out from something that mattered for once. Instead, I waited. I waited for her to go nuclear. And she didn't disappoint. 3 days later, she and Uncle Henry showed up to the courthouse with their lawyer and a revised motion. They wanted the entire trust suspended pending a full review of Grandpa's mental health in the final months. Classic move. Question the narrator. If you can't kill the message, kill the messenger. But here's what they didn't know: Laura had already anticipated this. She had Grandpa's full medical records from his final year, including 3 independent mental health evaluations. All signed. All confirming full cognitive function until the week before his death. They brought smoke. We brought fire. But the real showdown came in court. It wasn't televised. But it should have been. The gallery was packed. Camilla showed up in a black dress like she was auditioning for sympathy. Uncle Henry wore a suit he hadn't tailored since the Bush administration. Their lawyer did most of the talking, dramatic, theatrical, full of concern about legacy, moral intent, and family betrayal. But when the judge allowed the audio to be played, the entire courtroom went still. You could have heard a pin drop. Grandpa's voice filled the room. Not the man they painted, a frail, manipulated relic, but a sharp, thoughtful patriarch setting his affairs in order. He didn't rant. He reasoned. And when he named me the one he trusted to carry on what he built, it was more powerful than any signed affidavit. Halfway through the recording, I glanced at Camilla. Her mouth was tight. Her eyes darting. She wasn't acting anymore. She was just exposed. The performance had finally run out of script. When it ended, the judge didn't speak for a full minute. Then he cleared his throat and said, "This recording is, without question, the clearest articulation of the decedent's wishes I have encountered in a case this contested." He upheld the trust in full, denied their motion to suspend it, and ordered Camilla and Henry to cease all further contact with estate assets or face contempt charges. It was over. Just like that. But in their eyes, I saw something worse than defeat. I saw humiliation. Henry stormed out of the courtroom, muttering something about appealing. Camilla stayed seated for a long time. Then she stood, walked up to me, and leaned in close. "You think you've won," she whispered. "This family will never see you the same again." I smiled. "Good. That means they're finally seeing me." I walked out of that courthouse into blinding sunlight and a kind of silence I hadn't known in years. It wasn't relief. Not yet. But it was space. Space to finally breathe. To walk forward without waiting for the next ambush. That night, I drove back to the house, my house, and sat in Grandpa's chair in the study. I played the audio again. Not because I needed the reminder, but because I needed to say thank you. Thank you for trusting me when no one else did. For seeing me when I was invisible. For knowing that I would protect what mattered. Even if it meant burning every false legacy down in the process. And that's when I realized the war might have ended in court, but the real battle, the one for my own identity, that was just beginning. Because Camilla's words still echoed in my ears. This family will never see you the same again. And maybe that's exactly what I wanted all along. Victory has a strange way of hollowing you out when it comes too late. I won. The court confirmed the trust. The recordings burned every lie to ash. Camilla and Uncle Henry walked out with their pride bleeding. Their legal routes blocked. On paper, I had everything. But in the days that followed, the silence inside that house wasn't peace, it was fallout. There were no cheers. No reconciliation. No calls from relatives offering congratulations. Just whispers. Just distance. I hadn't just protected a legacy, I'd shattered a family illusion they didn't want to see broken. It started subtly. Old friends from family barbecues stopped replying to texts. Aunt Mara, who used to bring homemade bread every Christmas, quietly removed me from the group chat. The annual Monroe cousins picnic canceled due to weather, even though the sky stayed blue all weekend. One by one, the ties loosened. Nobody accused me directly. No one yelled. But I saw it in the way they looked through me instead of at me. Like I'd become the embarrassing truth they'd all rather forget. I didn't bend. I didn't explain. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Then came the second letter from Lenora. Unlike the first, this one wasn't filed through a lawyer. It came in her handwriting. Cursive and shaky. No accusations. No threats. Just a short, bitter paragraph that ended with the words, "You killed the Monroe name with your silence." I read it once, folded it twice, and tucked it into the back of the drawer. Not because it meant anything, but because a part of me wanted to remember what guilt felt like before I let it go for good. What she didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that the Monroe name had already been dying. Slowly, quietly, under the weight of decades of pretense, financial games, and emotional blackmail. I didn't kill it. I just stopped pretending it was worth saving in its current form. And yet, standing in the middle of that house, surrounded by the furniture and the photos and the paper-thin silence, I realized I couldn't live in this version of the story forever. Something had to change. So I did what most people wouldn't expect. I invited someone back. Not Camilla. Not Lenora. Joel. The cousin who almost took the bribe. I didn't do it out of trust. I did it because I needed to know if there was anyone left in this bloodline worth salvaging. He came with a bottle of wine and a sheepish look on his face. We didn't talk about the trial. We didn't talk about the bribe. We just sat on the back porch, watching the ivy rustle in the wind, and let the space between us settle. Finally, he spoke. "You know, I didn't take her money. But I thought about it. That's almost worse. Isn't it?" I didn't answer right away. Because yeah, it kind of was. But then he looked me in the eye and said something I didn't expect. "I always thought Grandpa liked you more because you were the easy one. But I was wrong. He trusted you because you don't flinch. Even when it cost you everything." That hit harder than it should have. I just nodded. That was enough. The next morning, I found a voicemail from Laura. Her tone wasn't her usual clipped efficiency. It was cautious. "Elias, we need to talk. Something came in the mail. I'd rather not say over the phone. Meet me at the office." That sinking feeling returned like a cold wave. After everything. What now? Another claim, another fake will. A long-lost cousin with a copy of Grandpa's DNA stapled to a birth certificate. I drove straight there. Laura was already waiting. Folder in hand. She slid it across the desk like it had weight. And in a way, it did. Inside was a series of documents, correspondence, financial statements, and a letter in Grandpa's handwriting. At first glance, it looked like a routine letter about the estate. But then I saw the name. For Elias. In the event of full inheritance. It was dated 3 years before his death. He hadn't just planned for me to inherit the estate. He'd planned for what would happen after. In the letter, he explained that the trust was only phase 1. The real legacy was hidden deliberately. The Monroe legacy was never money. He wrote, it was leverage. And that leverage is still in play. Attached was a key. Old. Brass. No label. Laura handed me a second envelope. This came with it. From the same safety deposit box. You're going to want to see what's inside. Inside that envelope were two things: a black and white photograph of a young man in military uniform and a signed confession. It was written by Grandpa Charles. Dated over 40 years ago. In it, he admitted to helping a prominent businessman, his friend at the time, cover up a major financial crime involving embezzlement and shell corporations. Not out of malice. Out of misguided loyalty. He'd kept evidence all these years as insurance. And now, he'd passed that insurance on to me. The key, it turned out, belonged to a lockbox buried behind a false wall in the basement. I found it 2 nights later. Dusted and forgotten behind old paint cans. Inside were binders. Files. Photos. Letters. Evidence. Not just about his friend, but about people in Crestwood's upper circle. People who still held influence today. And at the very back, one more sealed letter. Use this only if they come for you again. You don't owe them silence anymore. I sat on the floor of the basement for hours. The air thick with mildew and old secrets. This wasn't just inheritance. This was inheritance with teeth. Grandpa hadn't just trusted me to protect the house. He'd trusted me to protect the truth. And now I had power that could reshape everything if I chose to use it. But that's the thing about truth. Once you have it, you have to decide who you become with it. Because holding power and using it, not the same thing. And as I stood in the dark, holding my grandfather's final secret, I realized something I hadn't admitted until then. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I was afraid of who I might become if I used this. The lockbox sat open on my desk for 3 days before I touched it again. Every time I walked past it, I felt the pull, the same kind of pull I imagine a loaded gun has when you know exactly where to aim. The documents inside were more than just leverage. They were the kind of evidence that could unravel careers, marriages, reputations. Grandpa hadn't just collected secrets. He'd collected power. And now that power sat in my hands, daring me to decide who I wanted to be. The names in those files weren't strangers. They were familiar. Council members who used Monroe money to cover campaign debts. Local businessmen who used shell companies to launder profits and dodge taxes. Even a judge, one who'd quietly signed off on a real estate loophole that allowed Camilla to siphon over $50,000 through an LLC registered in Delaware. It was all there. Neatly cataloged. Carefully preserved. Grandpa had seen too much in his lifetime to trust anyone blindly. So he played the long game. And now, he'd passed the final move to me. I could have exposed them all. Overnight. I could have torched Crestwood's polished reputation to the ground. Camilla and Lenora would have been just footnotes in a much larger firestorm. Lara, ever the professional, laid out my options in clinical terms. You can leak this anonymously. Use it as political leverage. Or approach the authorities directly. Either way, no one would be able to trace it back to you unless you wanted them to. She paused. But once it's out there, it's out there. There's no rewinding this. I nodded but said nothing. Because the real question wasn't how, it was why. Why burn down a whole town for revenge on 2 people who already lost? Why detonate a nuclear secret when silence had already given me everything I was promised? But that wasn't the truth. And I knew it. Silence had given me peace. But it had never given me closure. And it never would. So I started making calls. Not to journalists or prosecutors, but to the people listed in those files. One by one. I set up quiet meetings. No threats. No recordings. Just a face-to-face reminder that I knew what they'd buried and that I could dig it all up if I wanted. Most of them didn't protest. They just listened. Pale and nodding. Realizing the ghost of Charles Monroe was still walking among them just now with my face. But I didn't ask for favors. I didn't demand money or property or apologies. I asked for one thing: protection. Not for me. For the house. For the land it stood on. For every untouched inch of Monroe history that still hadn't been paved over by greed or erased by redevelopment. I had the documents drafted: heritage designation, historical protections, zoning restrictions, so airtight not even the county board could maneuver around them. I made them sign. Sponsor. Support it. And they did. Eagerly. Because the cost of refusal was too steep. Just like Grandpa intended. It was over by the end of the month. The estate was fully secured. Untouchable. No one could seize it, flip it, or even build a guest house without my approval. Camilla's name was officially barred from any legal claim. Lenora's withdrawal from litigation was filed with prejudice, meaning she could never try again. Joel sent a quiet thank you note with a check attached. My share of legal fees. For not taking the bribe. I never cashed it. But I didn't throw it away either. Life returned to something close to normal. I renovated the East Wing. Turned the dusty guest room into a writing nook. I started hosting small dinners again. Real friends. Not relatives who wore loyalty like a Halloween mask. I found moments of laughter again, simple ones. The house stopped feeling like a battlefield and started feeling like a place to breathe. Not because I had won, but because I had ended it. One afternoon, I sat on the back porch with Laura, sipping tea. Both of us watching the ivy sway along the brick walls like it had done for decades. She glanced at me, then said, "You never used the file." "Not really." I shrugged. "I used it enough." She smiled faintly. "That's not what most people would have done." And I knew what she meant. Most people would have gone scorched earth. Most people would have made everyone pay in full. But I didn't want to be most people. I'd spent my whole life being underestimated. Quiet. Careful. The backup plan. The spare air. And maybe that's what saved me. Later that week, I went down to the basement one last time. I opened the lockbox, gathered the files, and walked them out to the fire pit behind the garden. One by one, I fed them to the flames. Not out of fear. Not even out of mercy. But because the real legacy Grandpa left behind wasn't blackmail. It was clarity. He gave me the power to protect what mattered. And I'd done that. The war was over. The castle stood. The last thing to burn was the photograph Grandpa in uniform. Hand on his hip. Eyes, serious, and full of something between defiance and wisdom. I held it for a long time before I let it go. It curled slowly in the flames. Edges crisping. The past finally releasing me from its grip. Weeks passed. Then months. The Monroe name faded from the gossip blogs and courthouse bulletins. The story moved on. It didn't. Not completely. But enough. Enough to sleep without checking the locks twice. Enough to walk into the study without waiting for the next ambush. Enough to write again. Because in the end, legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you choose to protect and what you're willing to let go of. Camilla moved to Nevada. Lenora stopped calling altogether. Uncle Henry's appeal was denied before it even reached a judge. And Joel, he came by for dinner once a month. We never talked about the trial. We didn't need to. He brought wine. I made chili. We were survivors. Not siblings. And that was enough. One night, after everyone had left and the house had gone still, I stood alone in the study, Grandpa's chair behind me. The fire low and warm. I looked around at the shelves. The photos. The layers of life that had been built and rebuilt through generations. And I whispered aloud. For no one to hear but me. I kept it safe. But I didn't let it keep me. And with that, I turned out the light. Walked up the stairs. And finally let the past rest. Story, the 2nd of July. Ian is my name. I've done two things for the most of my adult life. And I'm 41. Establishing my company from the bottom up and making a sincere effort to prevent my family from disintegrating. Being the oldest of three. I was referred to as the golden child when I was younger, not because I was especially smart or endearing, but rather because I followed my parents' instructions. I ultimately became the person who everyone relied on. Maintained my high grades. And avoided difficulty. With just a borrowed laptop and a used automobile. I launched a logistics business after graduation. 20 years later. That business is valued at millions. I don't say it to boast, but to set the scene. Because I always tried to keep everyone afloat in spite of everything I accomplished. And perhaps I made a mistake. My parents never had a lot of money. My mom occasionally cleaned houses when her back permitted. And my dad worked at a factory until it closed. Despite having 3 children with 2 different fathers and bouncing from job to job. My younger sister Paige always managed to get back on her feet. typically by landing on me and mine. I continued to assist. I paid for my parents' roof repair when it began to leak. I paid Paige's deposit when she was evicted. I swiped my card before my niece even asked for braces. It was the correct thing to do. I assured myself. That family remains united. However, as time went on, that distinction became less clear. That is, until the day I entered that house and everything fell apart. It was one of those late March wet Saturdays when you just want to cozy up on the couch. My 13-year-old daughter Lily had requested to see her grandparents. She adores them. Or she used to. Anyhow, after telling her I would return in a few hours, I dropped her off around midday and went to a nearby cafe to finish some work. I thought they would like seeing her. So we may bake something together or watch one of my mom's favorite black and white films. However, when I returned earlier than expected, I heard yelling before I had even passed the entrance. Sharp, piercing rage at Lily instead of the back and forth squabbling my parents usually engage in. Do a thorough dishwashing. You're a worthless girl. My mother lost her temper. I was paralyzed by the hatred in her voice. I listened while standing in the hallway with my hand on the doorframe. My heart was pounding. Grandma. I apologise. I didn't intend to. Lily's voice wavered as she stuttered. Grease all over the dishes was not your intention. Are you simply stupid or that indolent? Then the laughing started. Paige's children. I recognized her middle child's cackling tone. Mason. I suppose wealthy women are incapable of cleaning a dish. He gave a snort. My blood froze. When I entered the kitchen, I saw Lily standing at the sink. Her hands covered in suds and her eyes red. With her arms folded, my mother loomed over her. As if it were any other afternoon. Paige was on the couch, browsing through her phone. Popcorn was being thrown at the television by her youngest. At first, no one paid me any attention. Calm but loud. I said, Lily. She spun around quickly. Startled. I was struck hard by the relief in her eyes. What's happening? Dad, quietly. I asked. My mom straightened up. All day. She has treated me disrespectfully. Couldn't even properly wash the dishes. She's learning some responsibility from me. I glanced at the sink. A couple of plates. Barely anything. My daughter hadn't even been here 2 hours. She's a child. I said. My voice was low. But I could feel the heat building in my chest. Well, maybe if you didn't spoil her so much. My mom began. But I held up a hand. No. I said firmly. You don't speak to her like that ever. Pei looked up. Finally. Oh. Please. Julian. She was acting like a princess. I don't know what you're so upset about. Mason was kidding. Are you kidding? Mason looked like he wanted to vanish into the couch. So I turned to face him. Did you find her funny? He gave a shrug. She was sobbing uncontrollably about dishes. Then I could see it plainly. It wasn't an isolated incident. For years, this has been simmering. My family treated me like an ATM and showed me entitlement. Their next aim was now my daughter. They were no longer able to get enough of me. They therefore sought to shatter her. Defraude her. And make her equal to them. I said. Lily. I want you to go to the car. But now. My love. She brushed her sleeve across her face. Nodded. And slid by me. I looked back at my sister and dad as soon as I heard the front door close. Don't talk to my daughter ever again. I said. She is not visible to you. You never inquire about her. You don't make fun of her. You're finished. My father complained when he was half asleep in the recliner. Avoid overreacting. She must become more resilient. I glanced at my mother. Then at him. I'm the reason you reside in this house. I pay for all repairs, utilities, and any remaining mortgage balance. Do you recall that? My mother sneered. What the heck? You were reared by us. Slowly. I nodded. And I returned the favor tenfold. However, it ends here. I refrained from screaming. Nothing was thrown by me. I simply left, brought Lily home, prepared her some hot chocolate, and stayed with her while she watched cartoons on the couch until she fell asleep. After that, I made a drink for myself and began calling people. I couldn't trust my parents to keep things organized. So I hired a property management company 2 years ago to handle the paperwork and taxes on their house, followed by the bank and a lawyer. Unwinding the support networks I established wasn't difficult. I had saved my receipts. None of them realized how much they relied on those gears or how quickly the equipment would come to a stop after I left. Even though I knew exactly how to stop the gears from rotating. And it was only the start. The following week was unusually silent. I didn't pick up the phone. Paige sent a passive-aggressive text wondering why Mom was so upset over anything related to the mortgage. But I didn't reply. However, I didn't even check my father's voicemail. In my notifications, I noticed it. I required room. In years. For the first time. When the system malfunctioned again, I allowed myself to feel the burden of everything I had carried. Including every holiday dinner I had paid for and every utility bill I had paid. To keep their water flowing. They transfer every late at night. Generosity was no longer the norm. It was guilt-wrapped slavery. 10 days later, there was the first indication of true panic. Julian was buzzed through by my receptionist as I was in my office going over contracts. Someone is requesting you here. Claims that it is urgent. A woman by the name of Paige. I shut my laptop inside. Bring her in. Before the door had fully opened, she rushed into the room. She had untidy hair. Eyes wide. Face flushed, crimson. What did you do? She lost her temper. I remained seated at my desk. Calmly, I simply cocked my head. Paige. It's good to see you too. The bank sent them a notice. Foreclosure. Mom phoned me yelling. Do you mean this? They're losing the house because of you. I arched an eyebrow. You mean the home for which I have been making payments for the past 11 years? They were unaware of that. Did they not? With a controlled tone, I asked. They believed that someone was paying. Santa. Paige furrowed her brow. The point isn't that. You cannot just abandon your parents and allow them to end up destitute. I carefully got up, circled my desk, and came to a stop just in front of her. Paige, let me ask you a question. Would you let someone to remain in your house after they yelled in your child's face and branded her useless for seeing their grandson be made fun of and humiliated? She paused. No. For her, I said, since nobody spoke. That's what happened to Lily. Not you. Your mother. Or your father. You simply allow it to occur. She whispered that they didn't mean it. Oh. They were serious. Mason, who I suppose picked up that type of ruthlessness from someplace, did the same. She tightened her jaw. This is retaliation. Then, because your child's feelings were wounded, you're punishing us all, I said quietly. Boundaries are what this is. Something that has never existed in our family. Years ago. I ought to have drawn the line. She remained quiet for a while. Her eyes darted about as if she was trying to find the ideal angle. Then her face transformed. Less rage. More fear. She said. Her voice suddenly soft. You can't let this happen. They are the elderly, Juliana. There is nowhere for them to go. What if Dad becomes ill once more? At last, you and your children can take charge. Because I'm tired of being the only one who sacrifices anything. I responded. Paige parted her lips as if to protest. Then shut them again. Without saying another word. She turned and raced out. I took a seat again. Wiped my face. And let out a breath. I was guilty. I did. Of course. I'm not a stone person. I was reared by these individuals. However, at some point, they began to view me as infrastructure rather than as family. I was good as long as I paid. The moment I expected respect, I became difficult. The actual repercussions started 2 weeks later. My mother gave me a call. Finally, I didn't answer. I let it to ring. Her voicemail was left. Her voice trembled. We didn't realize you were serious. Julian. Please. The house cannot be lost. What we said to Lily was not intended. Simply put, it was an awful day. Give me a call back. I didn't. After listening to it once, I removed it. Lily became aware of a change. Although she was unaware of the specifics, she could sense a change. She asked me one night, "Are we still spending Easter with Grandma and Grandpa's?" "Dad," I gave her a kind glance. "No. Darling. Not this year. We are beginning some new customs." She gave a nod, snuggling up to me on the sofa. "Excellent. The way they speak to you bothers me." Nothing had struck me as hard as that. She had always seen it. Perhaps not the energy, but the words. Children always do. I couldn't unsee it now that I was seeing it through her eyes. Shortly after the 30-day notice period began, the last straw was reached. The property manager contacted me. So I knew. He claimed that despite my parents' attempts to personally appeal to the bank, the house was coming up for auction, since they had no proof of income or ability to refinance. Paige attempted to put it off, but her credit was in ruins and even her boyfriend had left when he saw how deeply in debt she was. I didn't do anything. My mother sent me a final SMS the day before the bank was supposed to take possession. "Please don't let us lose everything," it pleaded. I looked at it for a while. I knew I wasn't going to save them this time as I turned to face Lily, who was humming to herself while arranging the table. Her message went unanswered by me. I would have done so for years. If they hadn't meant it, I would have driven over with a checkbook and 1,000 excuses. They are no longer your parents. Yet they are still your parents. I kept hearing the words, "You're a worthless girl," as my mother leant over Lily, acting as like she were a servant rather than even family. I couldn't help but notice how her face was flushed scarlet. It wasn't a verbal blunder. When they thought I wasn't looking, that's who they truly were. Perhaps it was always that way. I drove by the house a week later, only to look. Not to boast. The Monday afternoon was cold. The sky was this thick gray. And spring hadn't warmed up yet. Similar to the climate. It couldn't decide whether to stay chilly or rain. There was nobody in the driveway. The bank's note was pinned to the front door and the curtains were drawn. The edges of every black print were distorted by weather. I parked on the other side of the road. Idling the engine, just stared. Our family has owned that residence for about 30 years. I recalled off-key music and paper plate barbecues throughout the summers in that backyard. I recalled wearing skinny pants while sitting on the front step. But it now appeared smaller, more depressing, and empty. Perhaps it had felt that way for a while. This is all it needed for me to see it at last. Pages. After a few minutes, the minivan arrived. I immediately recognized it. She had never repaired the same ding in the rear bumper. Clad in a heavy coat, she was the first to leave, followed by her children. Mason was pouting and taking his time. Avery, the youngest, was unknowingly dropping cereal from a bag she was clutching. Paige continued scanning her surroundings as if someone would suddenly appear and declare that everything was a joke. But nobody did. After reading the message and marching up to the door, she simply stopped there. I saw the tension in her shoulders. She turned and yelled at Mason after he said something that was most likely sarcastic. Everything about the situation played out like a movie I had watched too many times. Anga. Danielle. Deflection. Paige eventually took out her phone and began to pace. I recognized the person she was phoning. By the 5th try, I let it to ring. I turned off my phone since it was buzzing so much. Her worry, her justifications, and her assurances that this time would be different were unnecessary to me. I was previously familiar with the script. Once more, the following several days were calm. It was odd. Nearly tranquil. No drama. No cause. No group communications that involve guilt tripping. Lily became more cheerful. She continued to chuckle. Her speech and even her posture altered. She seemed to be becoming taller simply because she wasn't constantly being pulled down. We were having dinner one evening. Only the two of us. Bread with garlic and spaghetti. She said, "Dad, are we still family with them?" as she raised her head from her dish. halfway to my lips. I froze the fork. What are you saying? I asked cautiously. I mean, if someone is constantly being cruel to you, do you cease being family? I leaned in and put down my fork. Family is meant to provide you a sense of security. Cherished. They should never make you feel inferior. But they also don't have to constantly agree with you or say kind things. She thought so and nodded. They no longer truly belong to our family. I gripped her hand as I reached across the table. Although they will always be a part of our heritage, we now have the freedom to pick the type of family we want to create. She gave a little smile. Excellent. I prefer ours. That night, I had a knot in my throat when I went to bed. I am proud of her. Furious with them. A weird mixture that felt like a rock in my chest. However, it was not yet over. A knock on my front door woke me up the next morning. My mother was right there when I opened it. Unti die Herr. The jacket is too light for the temperature. As if she hadn't slept for days. Her eyes swelled. She remained silent for a long time. Appeared smaller than I had ever seen her as she stood there. At last, she said, Julian, just talk to me. Please. I didn't respond. Not quite yet. She looked inside the house. Beyond me, Lily is missed. I went outside and shut the door after myself. Do you miss her? I inquired. Or is the house something you miss? The bills were paid on schedule. The safety net that you once had. She opened her lips. Then closed it again. Nothing to say. I crossed my arms. Since you haven't been missed by Lily. Not once. She has resumed smiling. Sleeping well. And completing her schoolwork without crying. Her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't our intention. All we felt was frustration. You didn't want to make her feel inferior by letting Mason chuckle while you scolded her. She had to get educated. Instead of being treated like a punching bag, she should be treated like a grandchild. That made her wince. With a groan, I felt the chill pierce my sleeves. This was not my way of punishing you. I may have done it to protect myself as much as her. I lost everything. She muttered. Your dad accuses me. We won't even be taken in by Paige. For a terrible moment, I felt it as I gazed at her. There's that old impulse to put things right. However, I realized that this was not the moment to forgive after recalling Lily's face at the sink. Her hands red from the hot water. And her shaky voice. Not quite yet. Perhaps never. I turned to face my mother, who was shivering on my porch and threatening to cry. She used to tell me bedtime tales. Make my school lunches even when money was short. And stay up during storms just in case I was afraid. For a brief moment, I saw her not as the lady who made fun of my kid. And for a split second, a younger me roused the youngster who only wanted to protect his family and make his parents proud. To put a bit more effort into fixing everything. However, I was no longer that boy. Now I was a father. And everything altered as a result. You must go. Silently, I said. My mother's expression twisted as if she hadn't really comprehended what she had heard. Just give me a moment. Julian. I'll see Lily. She is my grandchild. I gave a head shake. You referred to her as worthless. The person you shouted at as if she were a nuisance in your home. Mom. It isn't love. Control is that. She wasn't someone you wanted to see. Like you did with me. You intended to mold her into something little. Silent. And submissive. She took a step forward. That is untrue. You were reared by us. No. I cut you off. I was brought up to believe that I owed you everything. I've also paid off that loan 10 times over. However, you now wish to rejoin my life. Lily's. In part. You must comprehend something. I inhaled. Listening to my voice. I no longer know you. Furthermore, Lily owes you nothing. She used her coat sleeve to wipe her nose. That's it. Then, are you simply interrupting us? Your family is us. After giving her a lengthy look, I spoke. Blood alone is not enough to sustain a family. It thrives on decency, love, and respect. I learned how to survive from you. However, I had to learn how to live on my own. Like the remaining strength supporting her. Her shoulders slumped. Had succumbed. Without saying another word. She turned and went down the stairs. She moved slowly. Each step weighing more than the one before it. Without turning around. I watched her go away down the street. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I had won. I felt liberated, and that mattered beyond anything else. The remainder of the family was affected throughout the course of the following several weeks. Paige said that I had wrecked everything and that I had no right to play God in a single text message. I didn't answer. It was pointless. Not because it was nasty. After decades of trying to comprehend it, I had finally come to terms with it. People who don't wish to quit harming you cannot be healed. 2 months later, the home was put up for auction. I didn't go. Maybe for closure. I gave it some thought. But instead I spent that day with Lily at a park. After eating ice cream and flying a kite, we rested on the grass and observed the clouds moving across the sky. She never mentioned them. I discovered a tiny photo album later that week while organizing some old crates in the garage. When I was a child, my mother would cook it each year. Pages of summer lake excursions, Christmas mornings, and birthday celebrations where everyone was beaming and everything seemed ideal. I flipped through an overturned paint bucket while sitting on it. A picture of Paige and I in the snow was there. We both laughed and red-nosed. My dad also taught me how to ride a bike. When I was a toddler, one of my moms held me. Joy filled her face. The past is a complex subject. It may have the texture of a chilly chain or a warm blanket. It was both. That photo album. I didn't bring it back into the home. But I also didn't throw it away. I put it back in the box. Taped it up. And left it there after writing a label on the front and using a heavy black marker in case I needed it later. Like it always happens. Time passed. Lily's 14th birthday. I took her to the mountains for a weekend as a surprise. Only the two of us. We discussed education. Her desire to learn to play the guitar. And a classmate who made her laugh but was most definitely not a boyfriend. She was careful to explain. My parents weren't questioned by her. After a year, there were 2. Then I received a letter one day. An actual letter. Not a text or email. Only my name and street were scrawled in barely readable script. And there was no return address. The penmanship was familiar to me. I carefully opened it. My dad gave it to me. The message was only 4 lines long. I'm not sure whether you'll ever read this. Julian. But your mother is currently living in a home. Dementia in its early phases. She calls for Lily and you. However, there are moments when I doubt she recalls what transpired. I've lost a great deal. I am not writing out of sympathy. I just wanted to let you know. I gazed intently at the letter. Numb. I read it twice. My father was never a talkative man. And I felt a sense of regret, not quite regret, in those 4 phrases. Like a person gazing down from the top of a cliff and wondering how they got there. I didn't reply in writing. I sat down with Lily that evening and told her the truth. But I didn't come over. Not all of it. Enough. Never interrupting. She listened silently. Do you think they are sorry? She questioned at the conclusion. I considered it. They seemed depressed to me. They probably regret losing us. 2. Is that equivalent to expressing regret? I don't know. She accepted it with a nod. Then she said something that will always stick in my memory. Perhaps apologizing isn't enough. Perhaps individuals also need to adjust. I gave her a glance. This little child somehow possessed the knowledge I had worked so hard to acquire. I grinned as well. I responded. You're correct. Sorry is only a word without any real change. Our embrace stated everything that needed to be said. Years passed. Lily received honors after graduating from high school. When daughter came across the stage, I was in the first row and cheered more loudly than any other parent in the audience. She was looking around the throng. And when she saw me, she smiled and gave me the tiniest smile. As if it weren't our time. Not only hers. After that, I never spoke to my parents again. 2 years later, my mother died quietly and alone at the care home. The funeral was not attended by me. Lily didn't either. My dad. He and Paige moved in together. As I understood it, I never inquired further. People may think I'm frigid after reading this, that I let resentment to eat away at the love that ought to have united our family. However, it isn't the case. Vengeance was not my choice. Peace was my choice. And sometimes, no matter what title they have, you have to let go of people who will not stop hurting you in order to find peace. It is impossible to construct a future while carrying the remnants of the past with you. I occasionally still drive by the old house. There is presently a new family residing there. In the driveway, children ride bicycles. In the yard, a labrador barks at squirrels. It no longer feels like our home. Home isn't a building. Therefore, that's good. It's the individuals you defend, the affection you foster, and the tranquility you strive to preserve, even if it means abandoning all you ever attempted to preserve. I became the father Lily deserved and at last stopped being their burdensome son. I can live with that legacy. Story 3. Daniel is my name. I am 34 years old. And I own a modest yet profitable home-based software company. I've always been more of an introvert. The type of man who would rather read a nice book and have a quiet meal than attend parties or large gatherings. Megan, my wife, is the exact opposite. Loud and charismatic. The room's lifeblood. For the most part, that contrast was effective for us. However, Sandra, her mother, was the one person with whom we never agreed. I would use the word overbearing to characterize Sandra. The type of woman who is adamant that her viewpoint is not only correct, but also divinely inspired. She won't argue if you confront her. She smiles while gaslighting passive-aggressively. Additionally, she constantly found a way to get into locations when she wasn't welcomed. Like as our house or our choices. Or our $50. Zero trip. As I just found out, it had taken me more than a year to organize that trip. The blue water of Bora Bora is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Bungalow above the lake. Everything has been resolved. I had been secretly saving money by working with travel agencies, including verifying each family member's dietary requirements. Megan. Our 2 children. Yes. Sandra. Since Megan demanded that she attend, it has been years since she was last seen. According to her, I bit my tongue. All right. If it meant providing my family with a priceless memory, I could put up with her for 10 days. She would behave. I promised myself. I was paying for everything. After all, 3 days before to the trip. Fast forward. I heard a phone conversation Megan had put on speaker as I was in the kitchen organizing last-minute details. Her mother was rambling on about how much she was looking forward to seeing Tom once more. I felt sick to my stomach. Megan's former lover from college. Tom was her ex. Sandra continued to follow him on Facebook and called him such a catch for some reason. I tried to speak calmly as I entered the room gently. Why does she bring up Tom? After a moment of seeming shocked, Megan attempted to dismiss it. Oh. She just meant that she had asked him to join her for supper when we returned. Not a huge deal. It was a falsehood. I knew right away. When Megan lies, her voice trembles a little. Hardly perceptible unless you've committed every word she says to memory over the course of 10 years. At the moment, I remained silent. My instinct urged me to verify the guest list with the travel agency. But I didn't press it. My hands were shaking as the agent verified the passenger list. And I can still remember it. According to her, Sandra Miller paid for Tom Thomas A. Colton's reservation on the same airline and bungalow cluster. But connected to your reservation, I had a tunneling vision. Without notifying me, this woman invited my wife's ex-boyfriend to the family vacation I had paid for. And she somehow persuaded herself that was perfectly okay. I didn't immediately confront anyone. I needed time to plan and think. I didn't want to blow out and turn like the crazy spouse. I began to observe and listen because I needed leverage. And I was infuriated by what I discovered. Tom wasn't the only one Sandra invited. He was to stay in the bungalow next to ours, as she had arranged. It was a small surprise. She told Megan. For her side, Megan says she was incensed to learn that she even attempted to have it cancelled. But it turns out Sandra had already paid a portion of it herself. However, Megan didn't tell me. So I wasn't persuaded. None of it was ever discussed by her. Not until I discovered it for myself. I continued to act calm. At the dinner table, I grinned, as if nothing had happened. I carried on packing. I was asked often if I was excited about Megan. Absolutely. With a smile. I would say, I'm eager to create memories. In the meanwhile, I started to covertly dissect everything behind the scenes. I first had my share of the deposit refunded after contacting the travel agent. I informed them that I was canceling my family's reservation due to an emergency. I didn't completely call off the trip. No. I did not alter the reservations. I just moved my money to another location. I then booked a separate room someplace entirely different for myself and the children. Somewhere quiet. No drama. No Sandra. I kept it a secret. Not the children. Not Megan. Not even my closest Paul. I wanted the quiet to be painful. Then it occurred the night before leaving. Our bags were arranged at the front entrance while we sat in the living room. Sandra arrived early. Naturally. With that smug expression she usually had when she felt she was getting her way. She drank her tea and glanced about. Then, as if it were the most casual thing ever, she turned to face me. For nostalgia's sake, I felt it would be good to invite Tom. He had a significant role in Megan's life. I assumed the children would also like meeting him. I looked at her for quite a while. Megan avoided looking at me. My daughter froze in mid-step. And my son looked up from his tablet. I grinned. Yes. Absolutely. I spoke quietly. I love a good surprise. I allowed the quiet to linger. Sandra's smile wavered slightly. And I saw it happen. Although Megan appeared perplexed, I could see her guilt growing. I excused myself, entered the bedroom, and snapped a picture of the updated reservation information. Forwarded it to my email. After that, I shut down the app, went back outside, and sat next to my children. I kissed them both and tucked them in that evening. Good night. We're going on an adventure tomorrow, I whispered. Just the three of us. My daughter blinked. What about mommy? I smiled and said. She's got a different kind of trip planned. Megan and Sandra stayed up late that night, laughing, sipping wine. At one point I heard Sandra say, Tom is going to flip when he sees Megan in a bikini. I stopped listening after that. I didn't want to hear anymore. At exactly 5:15 a.m., I slipped out of bed, packed my bag, and gently woke the kids. I left a letter taped to the bathroom mirror addressed to Megan. No yelling. No accusations. Just the truth laid out plainly. And a reminder when you let someone else invite ghosts into your marriage. Don't be surprised when the living walk away. And as we boarded our early flight to the Maldives with the sun rising behind us, I took one last look at my phone and turned it off completely. They could deal with whatever upheaval was ahead without me. At first, the trip to the Maldives was peaceful. The children were still half sleeping, nestled into the center seats and window, wearing headphones and neck pillows. I tried to quiet the turmoil in my breast as I sat in the aisle seat and watched the clouds move beneath us. I had lost my anger. Not in the yelling, flinging manner I had anticipated. It burned more slowly and steadily. Managed. Measured. I had no desire for vengeance, in the sense of a cartoon antagonist. I had no intention of destroying lives. I simply wanted to stop being treated like an idiot. Or worse. As if my own marriage didn't matter. I continued thinking about all the minor warning signs that I had ignored over the years, including Sandra's constant bringing up of Tom during family meals and Megan's refusal to reprimand her. How? Even after being married to me for over 10 years. She still kept old pictures of them in her mother's hallway. Megan would shrug it off and claim that her mother was simply being strange. Don't be upset about it. And I didn't. Years passed as I gulped. Sandra's posible remarks, such as Tom always helped with the dishes or Tom would have loved this vacation spot, made me uncomfortable. So I bit my tongue. She was simply mired in the past. I reminded myself that I was adored by Megan, that we were stable. I couldn't get rid of the thought that I had been blind. Though, as I stared at my sleeping children with my entire existence back in flux, or even overly lenient, and I wasn't going to continue to bear the emotional and financial consequences. The children cheered as we arrived in Mali. My daughter's face brightened like Christmas morning as soon as we got into the private boat that the resort had provided for us. In my experience, the water had the purest blue color. I chose the Maldives not just for its beauty but also for its remoteness and inaccessibility. The sort of location where what's going on outside seems like a rumor. When we arrived at the bungalow hours and there were no unwelcome visitors in the adjacent room, I had an odd feeling. It had been weeks since I felt relief. No tension. No drama. All I could hear were the waves and my children laughing as they sprinted around the rooms vying for beds. The texts began on the second day. I had switched on my phone for a quick Wi-Fi check-in with work. Curiosity won over. Even though I hadn't intended to read anything else. There were more than 50 missed messages in the family group chat. Megan sent the first one. "What's going on? Daniel, the reservation was cancelled. According to the hotel. This is Thomas. My mother is going crazy." The following few were a mixture of bewilderment and terror. I didn't bother to open the voicemail Sandra sent. Then Megan added another. "Tell me you didn't really leave. Please. This is crazy. You are behaving like a kid." That one almost made me chuckle. After what they did, it was childish. Then came the section that gave me a little indigestion. "Where are the children? You really took them and didn't inform me, Daniel. This is not acceptable." Gazing at the message, I let out a sigh. I wasn't proud of how abruptly I interrupted Megan. I knew this was more than simply the vacation. But I didn't want to be dishonest. Trust was at issue here. She had no money left in the bank at the moment. I responded with one sentence. "They're secure. When I'm ready, I'll go into detail." I then switched the phone off once more. Embora bora again. I later learned from friends and relatives that the repercussions had been severe. Sandra hadn't only invited Tom. It turns out, she believed she had used my money to reserve his accommodation. I cancelled everything that was in my name. The difference was not covered by her card. If they did not pay in full, the hotel would not let them check in. Tom arrived anticipating a nice reception. Perhaps thinking this was some sort of group reunion. Only to see a frantic Sandra and an enraged Megan fighting at the front desk. Their tickets were not refunded by the airline. There was a cancellation fee assessed by the property. Sandra was unaware of Tom's existence. After a furious argument in which Megan referred to him as having a walking midlife crisis, he made reservations for a trip home that same evening. Megan's Instagram story with the description, "Dream trip ruined," was the icing on the cake. "Thank you, Sandra and Mum." She fell silent. Not a single quote regarding Tom. No mysterious posts on Facebook. Radio silence. In the meantime, I did all I could think of during the days in the Maldives. Swimming with my children. Eating delicious seafood on the beach. Dozing off in hammocks. And watching cheesy movies in bed with them were all planned activities for that trip. It wasn't flawless. There is nothing. However, it was quiet. Sincere. Away from the cacophony. Megan eventually managed to get in touch with me via the hotel on the 6th day. During breakfast, I was given a note from the front desk. Megan wrote just 5 words in her distinctive calligraphy. "Do not give up on us. Please." For a long time, I gazed at the note. I wasn't sure yet if I needed distance or if I wanted a divorce. However, I was unaware of this. I couldn't ignore the boundary Sandra crossed when she brought Tom along on that vacation. And Megan had allowed her to do it by remaining silent. She may or may not have intended to. I turned to see my children using a local guide to build a sandcastle. They were giggling. I'm laughing so hard. And for once, my own family story did not include me in the background. I was in the center of it all. Right there. At that point, I became aware that something had changed within me and at home. 4 days later, when we flew home, that shift was about to send shockwaves. I kept our early return a secret from everyone. We took a covered flight. At 3:40 a.m., a red-eye touched down. I had made arrangements for a car to drive us directly home. It's a short-term rental. Not our home. Before the trip, I made a discreet reservation. It was a little but cozy 3-bedroom home on the outskirts of town. Tucked away by a lake and surrounded by towering trees. Calm. Private. Secure. I had no intention of fleeing my marriage. At least not yet. But just because the trip was over didn't mean I was mindlessly returning to the same house with the same issues. Megan had gone too far. She may not have welcomed Tom in person. But she had given in. Made it possible. Strike it. Above all, she hadn't prevented it. If the roles had been reversed, I already knew how the conversation would have gone if I had allowed my ex to go on a $50. Zero vacation and kept it a secret. There would have been no peace. That morning, I sent her a message. Once we were comfortable with the rental, we've returned. The children are doing well. This weekend, I'll drop them off at the house. She answered almost immediately. You can't simply leave like this. We must speak. Please. It wasn't until the last minute that I realized Mum had invited him. I didn't answer. Note kite yet. I did visit the house that Friday. But not by themselves. I brought Eric. My brother. He practices law. A man of silence. Sharp but as serene as a glacier. When we first entered, he didn't say anything. But Sandra was silent because of him. Yes. Indeed. Sandra was there. Sipping a cappuccino and looking through a home decor magazine as if nothing had occurred. Sitting in the living room as if she owned the space. Megan was standing close to the hearth. Eyes droopy and exhausted. Arms crossed. When I walked in, she reached for me. Could we please chat? Daniel, I'm signaling to go to the kitchen by myself. Sandra laughed at me from behind. I should be there if you're going to accuse my daughter of anything. I interrupted her without looking back. No. You don't. Then we entered the kitchen. It appeared as though Megan hadn't slept since Bora Bora. Her voice faltered. None of this was planned by me. It wasn't until the day before our departure that I even realized Tom was coming. My mother believed it would be pleasant. I said icily. For the sake of the past. She turned her head away. I was the first to know. And you said nothing to me instead. Megan. That's what counts most. You had a chance to defend us. For myself, you didn't. Either. She nibbled on her lip. Glassy eyes. I did not want the trip to be ruined. Perhaps she would cancel. I thought. She claimed to have covered the cost. She used my itinerary to pay for a portion of my trip before forcing herself to host. You were aware that it was incorrect. You simply didn't want a battle. Between us. The quiet weighed heavily. Not upset. Just depressing. Weary? I have no idea how to resolve this. She muttered. Perhaps you don't. I said. I left the kitchen behind. Sandra glanced up. Poised to make a sarcastic comment. Eric, however, got up at the same moment and silenced her by removing a folder from his back. I'll be spending the weekend with the children. Flatly, I replied. They will remain with me. Slowly. We're working things out. Megan remained silent. She only gave a nod. Her eyes were filled with tears. I eventually read the envelope. Eric left me later that evening after putting the kids to bed in the rental and sitting on the veranda to watch the moon move across the lake. Early drafts of a separation agreement, not a divorce, were contained therein. Just room. Limits. Organization. And above all, protection of my money. I wanted alternatives. But I hadn't decided yet. I desired lucidity. The days that followed were calm. No drama. No Sandra text. No unexpected visitors. Just lazy mornings watching cartoons and eating pancakes. Talking with my children and taking long walks by the lake helped me remember what it was like to be a parent and not simply a financial account. Megan called me on Monday of the next week. I waited for it to ring 3 times before answering. When I told my mother that she was no longer welcome in our home, she responded. She spoke in a hushed, almost embarrassed tone. I didn't want to make things more difficult. But I should have done it years ago. I was afraid about the reaction. I remained silent. I told her that I wanted to make this right. But I knew I would have to show that I meant it. After that, I canceled her keys. Modified the code. I'm severing her financial connection. She is enraged. I'm resentful now. However, I no longer give a damn. A lengthy pause ensued. I simply, Daniel, I want us back. Not as it was. Better than it was. As I reclined on the wooden chair, I saw the pine trees soft swaying in the wind. I was hesitant to answer at first because I wasn't sure whether I was ready to forgive. Not quite yet. Perhaps never. However, I became aware of something else as the wind blew gently through the leaves. The stillness didn't seem empty for the first time in years. It had the feel of vastness. Genuinely honest space. The sort that might, just might, develop into something different. Something more powerful. Or something else entirely. I still had that option. I took a while to respond to Megan. Not on that call. For the remainder of that day. No. I sat beside it. Leave the words hanging there. The goal was not to discipline her. It was to ensure that I wasn't hastily forgiving someone out of loneliness, fear, or guilt. I had been dismissing things for years and apologizing for emotions I was taught were too delicate. Putting up with her mother's persistent interference. I told myself that the conflict wasn't worth it. That maintaining harmony was part of becoming the greater person. However, silence based tranquilly is only pressure. It blows up eventually. I went the entire length of the little dock behind the lake home one night after the kids had gone to sleep. Sat on the edge. And let my feet hang over the water. I asked myself the true question as I gazed at my reflection in the undulating surface. Do I still have faith in her? Not affection. Love is simple. Known. The edges are soft. But have faith. Trust is a system. Everything above it becomes unstable as it cracks. Could I work with her to rebuild it, or had the foundation deteriorated so much that it was irreparable? I gave her another call in the morning. We'll get together. Tomorrow. I answered. Only us. A public setting. Neutral territoire. I picked a peaceful cafe on the outskirts of town. Close to the location of our first actual date. When things were easier. Prior to marriage. Prior to children. Megan arrived on schedule before Sandra began to consider our relationship as a tryout for her ideal family makeover. She appeared exhausted and emotionally depleted. No big motions. No makeup. Only her. For the first time in weeks. We really looked at each other as she sat across from me. I am aware of what I did. She added quietly. Or rather, didn't. I am aware that I did not defend you. I understand how painful that was. I didn't interrupt. I gave her a chance to speak. In our own lives. I allowed my mother to treat you like a second-class citizen. And I was too afraid of losing her favor to shield you from her. I gave up trying since I didn't think she would ever respect boundaries. However, it wasn't until lately that I realized I had made you feel unimportant by doing that. And I've never done anything worse than that. Even though her eyes were already wet. She chose not to cry or focus on herself. She simply let the stillness to envelop us. I've spoken to a therapist already. She added. 2 times a week. I've been going. I'm practicing self-control. How I let myself to be destroyed. How I inflict that harm on you. I am aware that it is not a panacea. This year or today. I don't anticipate your forgiveness. But I'd like to make this right. I wish to regain your confidence. Even if it means waiting a long time for the rest of my life. I remained silent. I wanted to express it correctly. Not because I was at a loss for words. You didn't just allow your mother to treat me badly. In my own marriage. I remarked. You made me feel alienated. I needed a companion. Not someone who would wince if her mother spoke. She answered. I know. And to her credit. She didn't recoil at this point. And whether you intended to or not. You chose to keep quiet over me when she invited Tom. Megan. It was your time. That was the one. You had the option to stop. She said. I wish I had. I leant back in my chair and took a breath each day. I will not return home. Not quite yet. I'm willing to continue meeting, talking, co-parenting, and seeing where this goes. Even if it's not for a long. However, Megan, you can't cure it. Before you can assist in rebuilding our borders, you must first rebuild your own. Slowly. She nodded. I get it. Without saying another word. We drained our coffee. It wasn't chilly. It wasn't sour. It was truthful. Perhaps for the first time in a long time. Things progressed slowly over the following 3 months. Consciously, Megan continued to attend treatment. Sandra sent guilt-tripping emails and made a dozen unsuccessful attempts to contact. Following everything I've done for you. No sense. She was blocked by Megan. The locks were changed. Even gave back a check. Sandra sent a simple message on the children's birthdays. Something fresh is being built. Please be mindful of our personal space. I had never seen her draw a firm line before. We continued to meet once a week. Occasionally more. Sometimes it's just us. And other times it's the kids. We discussed everything. The little things. Not simply the vacation. Sandra. Or Tom. We would no longer discuss our desires, fears, and missing things. I was aloof at first. Be cautious. Emotionally. I had one foot out the door. But then odd things began to happen. The barrier I had erected to keep myself safe remained intact. It moved. Turned into a window. We took another trip 6 months after the Bora Bora tragedy. Nor the Maldives. Nor Bora Bora. In the woods. A little hut. 2 hours away. Only the 4 of us. No social media. No phones. And no strangers. Nothing but quiet. Conversations by the fire. Board games. And home-cooked dinners. We had a great time laughing. Every night. My daughter dozed off on my chest. My kid, who had stopped using the moniker months ago, began referring to me as Captain Dad once more. Megan, too. She didn't beg for pardon. She demonstrated it by listening intently. Not recoiling in the face of conflict. And not avoiding her mother's name but refusing to allow it take over the conversation. He moved back in after we got back. As a choice. A decisión. Rather than as a reward or a restart. The problem is this. Because it shouldn't. Life didn't miraculously return to how it was. The previous iteration of ourselves was unsustainable. We didn't have to return. We had to change. Sandra made another attempt to get in touch. This time, via a family friend who sent me a lengthy apology via email. I didn't respond. Neither did Megan. We did not open the door. It wasn't retaliation. Peace was that. Regarding Tom. I am unsure of his current location. I don't give a damn. The threat was never him. He was only the last straw. A representation of all the issues Megan and I hadn't discussed. Like a ghost called forth by a woman unable to let go of the past. He entered our marriage. However, we did. We gave it up. Gradually. Daily. And now when I wake up, my children burst into our room. Their hair disheveled and their smiles drowsy. The man who paid for a trip that ended in betrayal doesn't seem like me. I feel like a man who lost everything when he went through a fire and yet managed to make it home. To a better home. Not the same one.